You ever talk to yourself just to feel like someone's listening? I do. More than I'd like to admit. Maybe it started as a way to hear my own voice, just so I didn't forget what it sounded like when someone cared. Or maybe it started the first time I realized there was no one else in the house. Not really. I guess this is for me. Or maybe for my kid, one day, if I ever figure out how to be a father. If I can unlearn all the ways I never got raised. Because I was raised by the absence. That silence where a man should have stood. That empty chair at the kitchen table. The birthdays where my mom's smile tried to cover for someone who wasn't coming. Ever. He left when I was 5. No explanation. No note. No drawn-out goodbye. Just a slammed door and the kind of quiet that echoes for decades. At first, I thought he just forgot something. I kept looking at the front door like he was coming back with milk or some tool he left in the car. Hours passed. Then days. Then years. And I realized some exits aren't accidents. The house sounded different after he left. Like the air got heavier somehow. Or maybe lighter in a way that hurt more. No more footsteps in the hall. No murmurs from the bathroom. Just me, Mom, and the quiet. I didn't understand what was missing. Not at first. Kids don't know what they're supposed to have. They just feel the holes. Like walking through life with a jacket full of missing buttons, always a little cold, always exposed. At school, I'd watch other kids run into their dad's arms, lifted up like they weighed nothing. I'd wonder what it felt like to be that light. That sure of someone. When they said, "My dad says," it sounded like scripture. Like gospel. Me? I had silence. I had maybe. I had. He used to. My mom did her best. She really did. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. She kissed me goodnight even when she was running on nothing but fumes and faith. She smiled with tired eyes, packed my lunches with sticky notes that said, "You are so loved," in loopy handwriting. I kept every one. But there are some things a mother can't teach a boy. Like how to shave. How to stand up for yourself without swinging first. How to say, "I'm scared," and still feel strong. So I learned from the absence. I learned that silence meant disappointment. That if someone didn't call, it was probably my fault. That men leave. That they lie. That they look you in the eye and promise forever, and then vanish like smoke. I started rehearsing goodbyes before people ever said hello. I didn't mean to. It was survival. Like keeping a bag packed just in case love decides to leave early. Again. There was a time I stopped asking about him. Not because I didn't care. But because the answers never helped. He had his own issues. He couldn't handle being a father. It wasn't you, baby. It was him. But what if it was me? What if I cried too loud? Needed too much? Laughed like someone he hated? I carried those questions like bricks in a backpack. Every year added another. By the time I hit high school, I was walking like someone twice my age. Angry. Suspicious. Ready to throw a punch just to feel something hit back. I found escape in music. The kind that felt like yelling into a pillow. Lyrics that sounded like someone else had been left behind too. And sometimes I'd just sit in my room, headphones on, volume up, pretending someone was singing just to me. My bedroom window faced west. I used to stare out at the sunset and pretend he lived on the other side of the horizon. That maybe he was watching the same sky and missing me too. Dumb, right? But kids do that. They build myths to explain why they weren't loved. Some nights, I dreamed he came back. He'd knock on the door, eyes soft with apology, arms wide. He'd tell me he was wrong. That he never stopped thinking about me. That he followed my whole life from afar. But I always woke up before he hugged me. And now I'm 34. I got a son of my own. He's 7. Big eyes. Big heart. Says, "I love you," like he invented it. And every time he looks at me like I hung the moon, I freeze. Because part of me still thinks I'm gonna vanish too. I don't know how to be what I never saw. Some mornings, I sit on the edge of the bed just trying to breathe. Trying to choose to stay. Not because I want to leave. God, no. But because something in me whispers that it's only a matter of time. That maybe love isn't something I'm built to hold. But I stay. I stay because he's watching. And I talk to myself like this, because maybe if I say it out loud enough times, I can rewrite the script. Undo the echo. Be more than the absence. The truth is, I hate him. My father. For what he didn't do. For the calls he never made. For not coming to my graduation. For not calling when I got married. For never meeting his grandson. But I miss him too. Isn't that messed up? To miss a ghost? To build an altar to someone who was never really there? I keep a picture of him. Not because he earned it. But because I need to believe he was real. That he had hands and a voice and maybe reasons. Maybe demons. Sometimes I stare at that photo and ask him what he was so afraid of. Was I that hard to love? Or did someone fail him too? I don't know how to forgive someone who never asked for it. But I know this, my boy won't wonder. He won't have to build me out of empty air and guesswork. He won't have to tape together old stories to know who I was. He'll know. Because I'll be there. Even when I'm tired. Even when I'm scared. Even when every broken part of me says, run. I'll stay. Because I was raised by the absence. But my son will be raised by me. She never said she was tired. Not once. Not when her feet ached from double shifts. Not when the water got shut off for a week and she had to haul gallon jugs from the gas station down the block. Not even when I came home with a black eye in 5th grade and told her I deserved it. She just pulled me into her arms like I was still small enough to be held, and whispered, "You didn't deserve that. You never do." My mom wore strength like armor, but soft. Not like steel, more like denim, worn, familiar, stitched together from 100 little sacrifices. She smelled like cheap coffee and hand soap. She made grilled cheese on the stove when we couldn't afford takeout, and turned the living room into a camping site when the power went out. Magic tricks to keep the lights on inside me. I didn't understand what she carried until I tried to carry something myself. I used to think she was enough. And in some ways, she was. In so many others, she had to be more than she should have. That's the thing no one tells you about single mothers. They become 1,000 things, most of them invisible. She was the one who taught me to tie my shoes, write my name, pack my lunch. She filled out every school form, stood in the bleachers even when she had to leave work early and risk her job. She clapped loudest. She hugged longest. She made $1 stretch like magic. But she couldn't be my father. And she knew that. It haunted her. I caught her crying once. I was 12. I had just stormed out of the room because she told me I couldn't go to a sleepover at a kid's house she didn't trust. I slammed the door loud, angry, trying to hurt her without touching her. A few minutes later, I came back downstairs, ready to apologize, or maybe argue more. But I stopped at the edge of the hallway. She didn't see me. She was sitting on the kitchen floor, back against the fridge, holding a picture of my dad in one hand and her phone in the other. Just crying. Not loud. Not wailing. Just leaking sadness. Slow and steady. She whispered something. I think it was, "I don't know how to do this." That moment cracked something in me. I wanted to run to her. I wanted to fix it. But I also felt angry. Why wasn't she enough? Why couldn't she hold it together? I didn't know then that strength isn't the absence of breaking. It's breaking and still choosing to show up. She chose me. Every single day. Even when it would have been easier not to. I remember one night we ran out of food in the fridge. Just some stale bread and a can of peaches left. She made French toast and called it midnight breakfast. Like it was some grand tradition. We lit a candle in the middle of the table and ate like royalty. She turned nothing into something. Over and over again. But the myth that love can be enough to patch a father-shaped hole? That was the lie she had to believe to survive. She never badmouthed him. never said he was trash. Never weaponized her pain. When I asked about him, she just said, "He had a lot to figure out. But he loved you in his own way." That line haunted me. Loved me in his own way. What kind of love disappears without a trace? But I get it now. She was trying to save me from bitterness. Trying to keep me open to the idea that I was still lovable. That his leaving wasn't a reflection of my worth. Still, that kind of weight does things to a woman. And to a kid. I watched her date a man once. Just one. A decent guy. Worked construction. Had kind eyes. He brought her flowers one afternoon, and I remember thinking, I hope he stays. He didn't. She never talked about it. Never introduced me to anyone again. I think she decided one heartbreak was enough for both of us. And maybe she was right. There were nights when I heard her crying through the wall, and I'd just stare at the ceiling, fists clenched. I wanted to go in there. I wanted to make it better. But I didn't know how. I was just a kid shaped like a question mark, always asking why he didn't stay and why she had to do it all alone. I know now how hard it is to keep showing up. To keep cooking, cleaning, loving, believing when you're running on empty. When I became a parent myself, the image of her in that kitchen came rushing back. I understood it then, in my bones. The way your body folds in on itself when no one's watching. The grief of not being able to give your kid the life they deserve. The fear of screwing it all up. But she didn't screw it up. Not really. Not even close. She held me together long enough for me to grow into someone who could question all of this. She made me safe. She made me seen. She taught me to be soft when the world tried to make me hard. And that myth? The one that said she had to be everything? That she had to make up for someone else's absence? It was never true. She didn't have to be enough. She just had to be her. And she was. She still is. I didn't know how to be a boy. Not really. Not in the way other kids seemed to. They had dads who handed down things, not just tools or baseball gloves, but ways of being. Walk like this. Talk like that. Don't cry. Shake his hand. Look him in the eye. They had blueprints. I had guesswork. I learned by watching. But watching who? Boys on TV. Boys at school. Older kids in the neighborhood who cursed and spit and fought like it meant something. I mimicked the loudest ones, the ones who never seemed afraid. I got in my first fight in 3rd grade. Some kid said I talked like a girl. So I punched him in the stomach before I could think about it. I got suspended for a day. My mom cried. She didn't yell. That was worse. She just looked at me like she didn't recognize me. "Is that who you want to be?" she asked. I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. I didn't want to be angry. I just didn't want to be weak. There was this constant pull inside me. A pressure to be something I couldn't name. I wanted to be strong, but I didn't know what real strength looked like. All I knew was that no one should see me cry. That crying made you pray. So I swallowed tears. Hid bruises. Laughed at pain. Learned sarcasm like it was a second language. I started lifting weights in middle school. Not because I liked it. But because I thought maybe muscle would make me matter. I wanted someone to look at me and see something solid. Something that couldn't be left behind. I was chasing a ghost version of myself. One that looked more like a father and less like a boy with questions. I remember this one time. I was 13, and I overheard a dad yelling at his son after a football game. Something about missing a tackle. The man was red in the face, voice sharp. And I remember thinking, at least he showed up. That kid had someone to disappoint. I only had silence. There was no one to look at me with that kind of rage or pride. There's a kind of numbness that comes with that. Every award felt a little hollow. Every birthday a little quieter. And every time a friend said, "My dad and I felt the sting, like I'd been left out of a story everyone else knew by heart. I tried to build my identity from scraps, rap lyrics, late-night movies, second-hand advice from teachers who meant well but never asked what I was missing. Sometimes I'd pretend. I'd lie. Yeah, my dad's just working out of state. He'll be back next month. He was in the army. That's why he's not around. We talk on the phone. He sends me stuff. None of it was true. But the lie made me feel less empty. It wasn't until high school that I started to realize how lost I was. I didn't know how to ask for help. Didn't know how to say, I'm scared I'll never be enough. So I acted like I didn't care. Aced classes I never studied for. Skipped others just to see if anyone noticed. Got into fights, but only when I thought I could win. Dated girls I didn't love, because I wanted to prove I was wanted. Left them before they could leave me. I was writing a story where I got to leave first. Where abandonment was a choice, not a wound. There were moments, though. Tiny ones. A coach who pulled me aside after practice and said, You okay? A janitor who let me sit in the hallway with him during lunch when I didn't want to face the cafeteria. A librarian who remembered my name. None of them stayed. But they were sparks in the dark. Proof that people saw me. Still, I had no guide. No hand on my shoulder saying, You don't have to be so hard all the time. I didn't realize I was building a cage out of toughness. By the time I graduated, I looked like I had it all figured out. But inside, I was a blueprint drawn in pencil, always at risk of being erased. And all I wanted was someone to say, You're doing okay. Just one man, even once, to look me in the eye and say, You're becoming someone I'd be proud of. But no one did. So I said it to myself. And that had to be enough. For now. I used to study other dads like they were maps. Trying to find the route to something I never had. Watching from the sidelines of birthday parties, school events, sleepovers, anywhere I could see how a father moved through a room. How he put a hand on his son's shoulder or tossed a ball or ruffled hair like it meant something. It always looked easy for them. I remember Joey's dad. He owned a hardware store, always smelled like sawdust and coffee. He showed us how to build a birdhouse once on a Saturday afternoon. Laid out the wood, the nails, the plan. Joey lost interest halfway through, but I stayed. I watched every step. Every word. Every laugh. He called me, kiddo, and gave me the leftover scraps to take home. I kept those scraps for years. Built nothing with them. Just kept them in a box under my bed like relics from a life I wanted. There was also Mr. Rivera, my middle school science teacher. He coached the robotics team. I wasn't on it, but I'd hang around after class, asking dumb questions just to stay a little longer. He wore a wedding ring and kept a picture of his daughter on his desk. Once, he saw the bruises on my arm from a fight I didn't win and said, You're not broken. Just bent a little. You'll bounce back. I think I would have followed that man into fire if he'd asked. But he didn't. Because he wasn't mine. None of them were. I borrowed moments. Snippets. Little scraps of fatherhood from men who had no idea how much I was taking. How every glance, every kind word, every pat on the back felt like water to a boy dying of thirst. Sometimes I wondered what it would feel like to belong to someone. To be someone's actual responsibility. Not a guest. Not a visitor. But a son. I think that's why I tried so hard to impress them. Made jokes. Got good grades. Helped carry stuff. I wanted to be seen. Not out of vanity, but survival. I needed someone to say, You matter. You're part of this. But borrowed fathers have limits. Invisible fences. You get too close, and suddenly you're reminded of where you don't belong. Of what you're not entitled to. Like when I got too comfortable at my friend Marcus's house. His dad would let me tag along to games and barbecues. He called me champ. But the day I asked if I could come with them on a weekend trip, there was a pause. A long one. Maybe next time, he said. There was no next time. After that, I stopped asking. I learned to keep my longing quiet. To be polite but distant. Friendly, but forgettable. It hurt less that way. By high school, I stopped trying to borrow dads. I focused on becoming someone other kids might want to borrow. I was funny. Protective. good at listening. I dated girls with messy family lives and became the guy their little brothers looked up to. I told myself it was enough. That I didn't need a father when I could just pretend to be one. But pretending is heavy. It starts to bend you. You start performing care instead of feeling it. You fake stability until you forget what rest feels like. I kept thinking I could build a foundation from admiration. That if I collected enough respect, it would stack into love. But respect doesn't hold you when you're falling apart. There were nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering where he was. Wondering if he ever looked at a kid and thought, he could be mine. Wondering if he walked past me once on the street and didn't even recognize his own blood. I wanted to hate him. But some part of me still hoped he was out there, regretting it all. That maybe, one day, I'd walk into a diner or a hardware store or some nowhere gas station, and a man would look up from his paper and say my name like a prayer. "I've been looking for you." But he never did. So I borrowed what I could. And when even that stopped working, I learned to make do with echoes. But echoes fade. And eventually, I was alone again. Just me and the question, what kind of man do you become when every example was borrowed, and none of them stayed? I still don't know the full answer. But I know this, the next part of the story wasn't about who I borrowed. It was about who I almost became. I didn't think I would ever be like him. That was the promise I made in silence, the one I whispered to myself whenever the pain showed up wearing his name. I won't be him. I won't leave. I won't vanish into doorways. I won't become a ghost. But promises made to pain are tricky. They come from fear, not from truth. They don't always last when the mirror starts to show you things you're not ready to see. I was 19 the first time I really felt it. That twitch. That impulse to disappear. My girlfriend had just told me she was pregnant. We were kids playing grown-up, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, stealing groceries when our paychecks ran dry. I loved her, I think. Or I loved the way she made me feel less alone. But when she said those two words, "I'm pregnant," it was like the ground cracked open beneath me. I didn't feel joy. I felt fear. Pure, crawling, gut-punch fear. I smiled anyway. Said all the right things. "We'll figure it out. I'm here. We'll be okay." But that night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, hearing his voice, not because I remembered it, but because I imagined what he might have said to himself the night he decided to walk out. I started to understand him, and that scared the hell out of me. Maybe he thought he was doing the right thing. Maybe he thought leaving was mercy. Maybe he thought he didn't have what it takes. And here I was, 19, broken, and terrified that I'd become him by accident. The baby didn't make it. Miscarriage. The word still feels like ash in my mouth. We never really talked about it. She cried in the bathroom. I punched a hole in the drywall. We broke up 2 weeks later. I told myself it was mutual. That it just wasn't working. But the truth? I was halfway gone already. The moment responsibility knocked, I opened the door just wide enough to run. I didn't leave like he did. I stayed in the same city. Paid my bills. Showed up to work. But emotionally? Spiritually? I was drifting. Unanchored. I started dating without feeling. Ghosted people before they could ghost me. I became the silence I grew up hating. Left text messages unanswered. Calls ignored. Always had an excuse. Always too busy. Too tired. Too guarded. Friends started to fade. I stopped noticing. I told myself I was protecting people from the storm inside me. But really, I was afraid they'd see I didn't have it together. That I was hollow. That I was my father's echo. There were flashes of him in me. Not the man I remembered, because I didn't really know him, but the idea of him. The absence. The distance. The inability to stay when things got heavy. I started keeping my wallet in the same spot on the dresser every night. I don't know why. Some weird attempt at stability. Like if I could keep one thing from moving, maybe I wouldn't drift too far. It didn't work. At 23, I fell in love again. Real love, not the kind you used to hide from yourself. She saw through my armor, saw the cracks, touched them gently. I told her everything. The childhood, the missing father, the fear of becoming him. She said, "You don't have to be like him just because he was the first man who taught you what not to be." But she didn't understand. He didn't teach me. He left me. And what gets left behind? It teaches on its own. I flinched every time she said, "Forever." I panicked when we signed the lease together. Commitment felt like a noose, not a promise. There were nights I sat in the car outside our apartment, key in the ignition, just breathing. Trying to convince myself to go inside. To stay. And every time I turned the key off and walked through that door, I felt like I was lifting a mountain. But I did it. Not perfectly. Not without screw-ups. I yelled when I shouldn't have. Shut down when I needed to speak up. Got cold when she needed warmth. But I didn't leave. Still, the guilt lingered. Because even when you stay, the fear that you'll break like he did doesn't go away. It haunts every silence. Every fight. Every pause between, "I love you," and, "I forgive you." When I looked in the mirror, sometimes I saw him. Not his face. But the outline. The posture of someone one bad day away from running. And I hated that. I wanted to be better. But wanting isn't always enough. You have to rebuild yourself brick by brick. Learn how to love without conditions. Learn how to stay even when every bone in your body screams to run. You have to become your own blueprint. And some nights, that means sitting with the ghost of your father in the room and saying, "Not today! Not today! You don't get to live through me. You don't get to win." It started with a scream. Not the kind in movies. Not theatrical. Not rage or panic. Just raw. The kind of sound you make when your whole world shrinks into the space of a single second and there's nothing you can do to stop it. My son was 3. Small. Soft. New to the world but already full of fire. He'd been sick all week. Fevers, coughing, breathing like it hurt. That morning, I held him in my arms while we waited at the pediatric clinic, watching his chest rise and fall too fast. He screamed when they tried to take his temperature. Screamed when they brought in the oxygen. Screamed like he didn't trust any of us to fix it. And somewhere inside me, a door opened. A familiar one. Run. Not literally. Not with my legs. But emotionally. Spiritually. I felt myself pulling back, folding inward, watching from behind the glass of my own fear. The same feeling I used to get when things got hard. When someone needed too much from me. When love became heavy. It would have been easy to detach. To check out. To tell myself I wasn't built for this. But I didn't. I looked at his face, flushed, scared, sweaty. His eyes locked onto mine, and it hit me like a wave. He's looking to see if I'll stay. And I did. I stayed. I stayed when they pricked his finger. I stayed when he clung to my shirt like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. I stayed when he finally fell asleep on my chest in the sterile, humming quiet of that exam room. And something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No lightning bolt. Just a slow, silent, soul-deep kind of change. I realized this was it. This was the moment I'd been running from my whole life, the moment of reckoning. The test. The fork in the road where you either become the man who walks out, or the man who roots himself so deep that leaving isn't even an option. That night, when we got home, I sat beside his bed long after he'd fallen asleep. Just watching him breathe. That tiny rise and fall, like the ocean learning how to be steady. I thought about my father. I wondered if he ever had a moment like this. A choice. A chance. A crack in the script where he could have rewritten himself. Maybe he did. And maybe he chose wrong. I wanted to hate him all over again for that. But mostly, I just wanted to do better. So I stayed. And staying didn't just mean not leaving. It meant being present. It meant showing up on the days that felt like failure. It meant learning how to be soft, even when the world had only taught me hardness. It meant saying, "I don't know," without shame. It meant choosing him, again and again, even when I didn't know how to choose myself. The day I didn't run wasn't a single day. It was every morning I woke up afraid and showed up anyway. Every diaper I changed with shaking hands. Every story I read with one eye on the clock, exhausted. Every night I whispered, "I love you," and meant it, even if I didn't always feel like I deserved to say it. The day I didn't run is still happening. It's in the grocery trips with his tiny hand wrapped around my finger. It's in the way he lights up when I walk through the door. It's in the questions he asks, the ones that make me feel like I might actually be doing something right. "Daddy, were you scared when you were little? Daddy, why do you always stay with me when I'm sick? Daddy, are you proud of me?" Yes. Yes. Always yes. I don't run anymore. Because love gave me someone worth staying for. And in staying, I became someone worth loving back. The first time he said it, I almost didn't respond. Not because I didn't hear him, but because I wasn't sure he meant me. We were in the kitchen. I was pouring cereal. He was in his pajamas, sitting on the counter like he always did, swinging his legs back and forth like they were still getting used to gravity. And then he said it, casual and clear. "Daddy, can I have the blue bowl?" It was the way he said it. So certain. Like there was no doubt in his mind that that was who I was. Not just what he called me, but who I was. "Daddy." Like the word belonged to me. I handed him the blue bowl. My hands shook a little. Because that one word hit harder than anything I'd ever been called. It wasn't about biology. It wasn't about titles. It was about trust. He trusted me with his breakfast. With his questions. With the space that echoed when I was a boy. And the more he said it, the more I started to believe maybe I was worthy of it. "Daddy, why is the moon following us? Daddy, do superheroes get scared? Daddy, can you stay just a little longer tonight?" He didn't carry the past. He didn't see the broken pieces I tried to glue together in silence. He didn't know about the days I almost left, or the years I spent trying not to become a ghost. He just saw me. And in his eyes I wasn't the echo of someone who failed. I was solid. I was here. I was his. It changed the way I moved through the world. I used to walk like I was bracing for loss. Now I walk slower. Softer. I kneel more. I make eye contact. I say, "I don't know," with pride, because he reminds me that curiosity isn't weakness. We built little rituals. Morning hugs. Pizza Fridays. Dinosaur socks on Wednesdays. Bedtime stories with the same 3 books he never gets tired of. He makes me read the voices. Even the embarrassing ones. And every time he says, "Daddy," I try to absorb it like medicine. Some days I still feel like an imposter. Like I'm wearing a name that doesn't fully fit. But then he wraps his arms around my neck and says, "I love you, Daddy." And I realize, he doesn't need me to be perfect. He just needs me to be there. The world will teach him that men are supposed to be tough. Quiet. Unshakable. But I want him to see me cry. I want him to see me mess up, say sorry, make it right. I want him to know that staying isn't just about showing up, it's about being honest in the staying. Vulnerable. Human. He doesn't know the weight that word carries for me. But one day, maybe he will. Maybe he'll be pouring cereal for his own kid. Maybe he'll hear that word fall from a small mouth with absolute trust, and maybe he'll feel his chest tighten the same way mine did. And I hope when that happens he doesn't flinch. I hope he smiles. Because when a child says, "Daddy," they aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for presence. And I'm doing everything I can to give him that. Every time. Every day. Because now, when he says, "Daddy," I answer like it's the most important name I've ever had. Because it is. Even in peace, the past finds a way in. It sneaks in through the corners of quiet. Through the soft hum of a white noise machine. Through the way a crib creaks under the weight of a sleeping child. The first time I saw the shadow on his nursery wall, I froze. It was just a trick of the light. The way the hallway lamp spilled across his bookshelf. But for a moment, it looked like someone standing there. Watching. Waiting. And my chest tightened in a way I hadn't felt in years. I told myself to breathe. That it wasn't real. But trauma doesn't care about logic. My body remembered things I never gave it permission to. I remembered waking up alone in a dark house. I remembered the sound of my mom crying behind the bathroom door. I remembered the silence after a slammed door, and how it echoed for hours, then days, then decades. And suddenly, I was afraid again. Not of the dark. Not of the shadow. Of myself. Because what if that shadow wasn't outside me? What if it was in me? What if no matter how hard I try, I carry him inside me like a splinter under the skin? What if I fail this kid? That thought lives in the quiet. In the stillness after bedtime. In the space between I love you and good night. I sit on the edge of his bed some nights, watching him breathe, and wonder if he'll remember this. If he'll grow up and say, "My dad used to sit with me until I fell asleep." Or if some mistake I haven't made yet will echo louder. I tried to do everything right. I read the books. I go to the parent-teacher meetings. I pack his lunches with little notes that say, "You are so loved," just like my mom used to do. But some nights, the shadow wins. I raise my voice when I shouldn't. I shut down when he needs me to be open. I walk away for a minute too long, not because I'm leaving, but because I don't trust myself not to say something I'll regret. And afterward, when he looks up at me with those big forgiving eyes and says, "It's okay, Daddy," I feel like I'm breaking. Because it shouldn't be okay. He doesn't know I'm fighting a war no one can see. I'm not just parenting him, I'm reparenting myself. Teaching myself how to show up. How to hold space. How to soothe a scared child when I never learned how to soothe the one in me. I thought healing would be a destination. But it's not. It's a hallway. Long winding. Full of shadows. Sometimes I walk it steady. Other times I crawl. But I keep moving. Because every time I tuck him in, I get another chance. Another chance to prove to him, and to me, that the cycle can break here. That love doesn't have to vanish. That fathers can stay. I don't always feel like I'm winning. But he hugs me like I already have. And that's enough to keep the shadows on the wall from becoming monsters in the room. At least for tonight. And maybe that's all I need. I never expected to find him. After all these years, I'd stopped looking. Stopped imagining some tearful reunion. Stopped believing he was anything more than a shadow stitched into the lining of my memory. But life has a way of stirring up what you think you've buried. It started with a letter. Folded tight. No return address. Just my name, written in handwriting that felt like a stranger trying to be familiar. Inside was a name. An address. A sentence. "If you want answers, I'm here." I stared at it for hours. Days. Left it on the counter, beside bills and grocery lists and other things that demanded far less courage. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mom. Not my partner. Not my son. I didn't want advice. I didn't want permission. I wanted to decide, on my own, if I could face the man who made me feel like I didn't matter. Eventually, curiosity won. Or maybe it was anger. Or maybe it was that little kid inside me who never got closure, tugging at my sleeve saying, "Please just ask him why." So I drove. 6 hours and 23 years. I parked outside a rundown house with peeling paint and a porch that sagged in the middle. There were wind chimes hanging in the corner, catching just enough breeze to make the whole thing feel too quiet. I knocked. The door opened, and there he was. Older. Smaller than I remembered. Gray in the beard. Hands shaking slightly. Eyes like mine, but duller. "You look like him," he said. "You are him," I answered. We stood in that doorway for a long time. Time enough for 1,000 things to be said without speaking. He let me in. Made coffee he didn't drink. Sat across from me like he was scared I might vanish the way he once did. "Why now?" I asked. He sighed. Because I'm dying. I didn't flinch. Didn't offer sympathy. Just waited. Liver. Probably too far gone, he said. I'm not trying to make you feel anything. I just didn't want to leave this world without giving you something. Even if it's just the truth. I could have screamed. Cursed. Walked out. But I didn't. I listened. He told me about his own father. A man who drank more than he spoke. A man who left bruises and silence in equal measure. He told me how he tried to be better, and failed. How fear swallowed him whole. How shame kept him from writing. Calling. Coming back. I thought you'd be better off without me, he said. And I was wrong. I didn't forgive him. Not right away. But I saw him. For the first time in my life, I saw the broken boy inside the broken man. I saw someone who never learned how to stay. Someone who ran because no one ever taught him how to stand still in the face of love. And maybe, just maybe, I understood him. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just talked. About baseball. About music. About the first time I rode a bike and how he wasn't there. About the time I broke my arm and wondered if he'd come visit. He said he wanted to. That he almost did. Almost. The most useless word in the English language. Before I left, I stood at the door, hand on the knob, and I said, "You missed a lot." He nodded. "I know. But I didn't." He looked at me then. Really looked. And I think he understood what I meant. I didn't miss my life. I didn't miss being a father. I stayed. I showed up. I made different choices. And maybe that's all I needed. Not closure. Not reconciliation. Just the proof that I wasn't him. I walked back to my car. Closed the door. Sat there with my hands on the wheel and my heart in pieces. And then I drove home. Back to my son. Back to the life I built from everything he left behind. And this time, I wasn't carrying the ghost. I was burying it. It doesn't end with a grand gesture. There's no dramatic music. No perfect sunset. Just me, standing in the doorway of my son's room, watching him sleep. The house is quiet. The kind of quiet that used to scare me. The kind of quiet that reminded me of the empty seat at the table, the door that never reopened, the echo of a name I stopped saying out loud. But now it's different. This quiet holds something. It holds peace. Because I stayed. Because every day, I chose to show up. And not just as a body. As a father. As a man trying, failing, and trying again. I made mistakes. Lost my temper. Forgot the field trip. Said the wrong thing. Said nothing at all, sometimes. But I always came back. That's the thing no one tells you. Being a dad isn't about knowing what to do. It's about refusing to walk away when you don't. It's about being there when you're scared, when you're tired, when you feel like you've got nothing left to give and realizing your presence is the gift. I used to think I was broken. But maybe I was just unfinished. Maybe we all are. Some days I still hear the voice. The one that whispers I'm not enough. That I'm faking it. That any minute now, I'll mess up in a way that can't be undone. But then he calls for me in the night. Not his mother. Not a dream. Me. And I go. And I sit beside him and rub his back and whisper. I'm here. Because I am. I am here. I am not the absence. I am the answer to it. He'll never know the weight of that sentence. Not yet. Not now. Maybe one day, when he's older, and life starts pressing its thumb into the soft places. Maybe then he'll understand what it means that I stayed. But he doesn't need to know it all. He just needs to feel it. In the way I listen. In the way I show up to his soccer games, even when I hate sports. In the way I make pancakes on Saturdays, and tell him jokes that don't land but still make him laugh. In the way I tuck him in with the same care my mother once used to hold me together. He's being raised by a man who knows what absence feels like. And that's why I work so hard to be present. Not perfect. Present. That's enough. That's everything. Because this story didn't start with love. It started with loss. But somewhere along the way, I stopped trying to heal the wound by looking backward, and started building something forward. I was raised by the absence. But my son? He's being raised by me. And that is the story. That is the legacy. That is the ending. Not with the door slammed shut, but with the door left open, and a light left on. Always.